I hope you all have a good Monday. I hope you all have a nice week. Our topic is Cold War or Cold Wars today. If I can
Everybody's
manage.
going to take notes, yeah? All of you are going to take notes. Okay?
Mhm.
So you're going to have to share your PowerPoint on your end. Okay, make sure you guys have your speakers off. Okay, Mr. Sesner, you can share your slides from your end.
Şuna bas peki. It's coming in a minute. Şuna bas. Mrs. Keola, what do you have on the screen?
Okay, there. I see it now. Okay.
Do you see it now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Cold Wars, NATO and Turkey.
Okay, class, I want you guys to pin that on your screen.
I believe you handle this topic to a certain extent under the name of Cold War, implying the period from 1950s to 1980s. Here we have S, Cold Wars, instead of Cold War, in plural form. In the minutes to come, I'm going to explain the reason why I use it in the plural shape. Cold Wars, NATO and Turkey. Speaking of Turkey, as Mrs. Keola mentioned a few minutes ago, in slightly earlier periods, Turkey was called Ottoman Empire. Here is a map of the Ottoman Empire before the First War. The green-colored region shows the borders of the Ottoman Empire before 1914, in other words, before the First War. As you probably know, Ottoman Empire sided with the Germans.
Orhan, I think, did you leave it on PDF format? Because I think if you're showing the PDF slides that you showed me or you sent to me, I think you have to scroll. You have to scroll up, because I think. Do you want to show the map right now?
Yes.
Okay.
Is it on the screen?
No, I'm not seeing the map. I think you have to scroll. Yeah. I think you need to scroll up.
Does anything change?
No.
No? Okay. Please hold on for a minute.
Okay.
Sen biliyor musun işte? Nehir. Olmuyor kızım. Şuradan çağır. Çıkmıyor ekrana. Do you see the map now? Mrs. Keola?
No, I don't see the map. Do you guys see the map? You guys don't see it, right? It's the same thing.
Do you see the name of the slide? Turkey before the First War?
No. Can you see my screen? This is what we're seeing. Do you see my screen? Like, no. Oh, there. Okay. Okay, now it's showing. Okay.
Do you see it now?
Yeah, it's good. Okay,
it's
now
good.
Thank you.
Okay. So the green colored region shows the borders of the Ottoman Empire before the First War. They sided with the Germans in 1914 And as you know, they were the losers of the war in 1918. Therefore, many regions of the then Ottoman Empire were occupied by the forces of the winner countries. Do you see another map, Turkey after the First War? Mrs. Keola?
Yes, we see it.
Okay. I'm sorry, this isn't Turkish, but Osmanlı. You see Osmanlı, the very light pink colored region, shows the area or the region left to the Ottoman Empire by the winners of the First War. So a little tiny region was left for the Ottoman Emperor. The rest of the former Ottoman Empire was occupied by the foreign powers. England, İngiltere in Turkish, and France, they occupied most of Asia Minor and most of the Middle East. Italy occupied a large part of southern and central Turkey, and Greece occupied a part of Western Asia Minor or Western Turkey. So under these circumstances, one of the young leaders of the Turkish military by the name Mustafa Kemal, he denied this agreement signed by the Ottoman Sultan. Therefore, he started the resistance and he started what we call the War of Independence in Turkey against the foreign powers who occupied the region of Asia Minor. This was in 1919. And right before during the First War, remember from 1914 to 1918, towards the end of the First War, an interesting thing happens in the north, in Russia. In 1917, communists come to power in Russia. That's Communist Revolution. And this is their leader, Vladimir Ilyich Lenin. What this Russian Communist Revolution have to do with Turkey is that Russia, siding with the UK and France under the kingdom, changed its policy with the coming of the communists. Lenin and his Communist Party declared peace in all the fronts where former Russian kingdom was fighting. So this meant the withdrawal of Russian fighters from eastern Turkey. And according to then communist thinking, foreign powers were outsiders trying to occupy the homeland of another nation. Therefore, they were to be helped by communist Russia. And therefore, a lot of weaponry and financial aid came from Russia during this War of Independence under Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, who is later to be the founder of modern Turkey. So these are the two presidents of the two countries, Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, the communist leader in Russia, and Mustafa Kemal Atatürk in Turkey. Under their rule, Turkish-USSR relations were very friendly. And likewise, I'm sorry. This is not a good example. He was a smoker, undeniably. Anyway, under their leadership, a treaty was signed by a number of countries concerning the status of the Bosphorus in Istanbul, Sea of Marmara, and the Dardanelles or the Hellespont. You see, Aegean is a part of the Mediterranean between Greece and Turkey, and Aegean is connected with the Sea of Marmara through the Hellespont or Dardanelles near Troy. And Sea of Marmara is further in the north, connected with the Black Sea through the Bosphorus in Istanbul or Byzantium or Constantinople. This is the Black Sea, Turkey in the south, Ukraine and Russia in the north. And a treaty was made between the countries coasting the Black Sea and some of the neighboring countries in 1936. It was named after the city where the treaty was signed in France, in a town called Montreux. My spelling might be wrong though. And according to several articles of this treaty, Bosphorus, Sea of Marmara, and the Hellespont or Dardanelles, they were defined as international waterway. And Turkey was given the right of controlling the international waterway. However, this didn't mean the blocking or perfectly controlling at the time of the peace. Only in the times of war, Turkey was given the right to block the shipping through the Bosphorus or through the Hellespont. Innocent shipping was always permitted, was always to be permitted by Turkey. However, the shipping of the outsider countries, I mean, the countries who do not have a coastline on the Black Sea, they could make use of the Bosphorus and Sea of Marmara, and they could come into the Black Sea under certain circumstances. Sizes were limited, the weights of the ships were limited, and the duration or the sojourn of the ship in question in the Black Sea was limited. They could stay maximum 3 weeks in the Black Sea. At the end of this period, they were supposed to depart. Likewise, the ships wouldn't be heavier than 15,000 tons. This treaty is very important even today, especially under the because during the tension between Ukraine and Russia. Here is another portrait of a later communist leader, Joseph Stalin, who came to power after Lenin, who definitely changed the foreign policy of Russia or USSR in the shape of menacing or threatening the neighboring countries, in the shape of claiming rights over certain territories of the neighboring countries, primarily Turkey, Persia, and some other neighboring countries. The coming map shows the regions of Turkey over which USSR or the USSR claimed rights under Stalin. You see, this is eastern extremity of Turkey, bordering Georgia and Armenia, which were under the USSR back then. And under this newcomer leader by the name Stalin, USSR claimed rights over these provinces of Turkey. So under the threat of Stalin, the leader of the USSR, Turkey started to feel kind of undefended or unprotected. And in the same period comes the birth of NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, in 1949. This map kind of shows the initial borders of NATO. You see North Atlantic Ocean, US, Iceland, Denmark, UK, Germany, and France, the earlier members of NATO. And slightly later, in 1950, 1 year after the birth of NATO, the war breaks out in Korea. North and the South, they fight, and NATO and the US is involved in the war. Likewise, Turkey, which is not a member of NATO back then, sent a lot of troops to Korea from Turkey. This picture shows a number of Turkish fighters or soldiers with their own flag in Korea. Likewise, the coming picture shows the battlefront and Turkish soldiers in the trenches in Korea. I'm sorry. And at the end of the Korean War, Turkey is accepted to NATO along with Italy and Greece. Here comes a map of later borders of NATO. However, you see the growth of NATO in the later decades. Italy, Greece, and Turkey, they become a member of NATO in the early 1950s. This is kind of interesting. NATO, remember, North Atlantic, hereabouts. And here we are mentioning these three countries who have no common borders or no coastline with the North Atlantic Ocean. They are further in the south, far away from North Atlantic. Yet, in terms of ideas, freedom, democracy, and human rights, they felt as if they were a member of the Western civilization. Therefore, they were supposed to knock at the doors of NATO, and they were accepted to NATO. And in the same period, especially after the Second War, with all the destruction Europe suffered, the US decides to financially back those countries to eradicate the devastation caused by the Second War. And all of this financial aid is called Marshall Plan in 1950s. And although Turkey was neutral during the Second War, although Turkey didn't suffer the destruction of the Second War, it was included within the Marshall Plan in 1950s. And agricultural reforms, which started slightly earlier in Turkey, gained acceleration with the coming of Marshall Aid, in this case in the shape of modern machinery and tractors sent from the US to Turkish farmers. In the same period, it's a nice picture, and I chose the title, The Share of the Turkish Kids. This is a primary school. An interesting aspect, the first interesting aspect, is that in Turkey, you see the kids at primary and secondary school levels, they are dressed in the same way. This has nothing to do with the Cold War. This has to do with getting rid or eradicating the class or income level differences between the kids. It is the case even today in Turkey. In schools, the kids are supposed to be dressed in the same way. In case of freedom of dressing, as you can assume, richer ones will show up with fancy clothing, poorer ones will not be able to afford. Therefore, a lot of conflicts and jealousies or different feelings will show up. So this is a nice way of disguising class differences among the kids in Turkey, and it has been this way even today. Here to the left corner, you are looking at the school teacher having a metal pitcher in her hand. After lunch break, the kids, as a part of the Marshall Aid, they were supposed to drink American powder milk sent by Uncle Sam. According to then terminology, US was called Uncle Sam from a faraway geography. And I was a part of such a classroom in the 1970s. Yeah, here comes the can, powder milk, a gift to Turkish nation from, Turkish is this way, States United America. I tell you, this American powder milk used to taste so bad. We hated to drink it, but the teachers were determined, and they would say, if you refuse to drink, Uncle Sam will be upset. And slightly later, in the late 1950s, comes American nuclear-head missiles to Turkey. This is a map of Turkey and the immediate surroundings. Çiğli missile base is near Izmir, near Ephesus in Turkey. And I forgot their name. Yeah, I think they were called Jupiter nuclear head weapons or missiles. And they were based in Çiğli in Turkey. And you see the shooting distance of these American missiles in Izmir was about 1,500 miles. You see this diameter of the semicircle. All of these cities were within the shooting distance of these Jupiter missiles based in Izmir. And what the USSR, in return for these American missiles, did was this. Cuba, the island country to the south of the US, had a communist revolution in 1959 under the leader Fidel Castro, and they had friendly relations from then on with the USSR and with the other communist countries. Therefore, as an answer to American missiles in Izmir, USSR based nuclear-head weapons or missiles in the island of Cuba, 1960 or 61. And their shooting distance was even twice longer than that of the American missiles. You see, 3,000 kilometers, that converts to 1,800 miles. Chicago, Boston, even some Canadian provinces, Detroit and Washington were in the shooting distance of these Russian or communist missiles stationed in Cuba. At that time, Kennedy was the president of the US and Khrushchev was the head of the USSR. This is a nice cartoon. See who is stronger, who will be the winner. American President John F. Kennedy and Nikita Khrushchev, the communist leader, they are having the wrist wrestling and they are seated on top of the nuclear head missiles on either side of the desk or the table. After a long high stress period between the two powers, a meeting is organized by the UN, which was a baby back then, and John F. Kennedy and Khrushchev had long negotiations, at the end of which American president accepted to remove the nuclear head Jupiter weapons or missiles, from Izmir. And in return, Khrushchev promised to remove the Russian missiles in Cuba. Both sides kept their promise and the tension decreased. However, there was a bitter or sad reflection of this peace agreement for the case of Turkey, because the missiles were removed without the information of the Turkish government. American bases were American soil, so Turkey didn't have any control or inspection or any idea about what was going on in the American bases. That is to say, American missiles in Izmir were removed in 1962, and Turkish authorities didn't know about this until the latest months of 1963, which was the first crisis between American and Turkish relations, because Turkey was still very self-confident with the supposedly presence of American missiles in Izmir, in case if Russia or USSR, attacked Turkey, American missiles were going to protect Turkey against the Russian invasion. However, they were not available there anymore. So the Turkish-American relations had the first crisis with the end of this Cuban problem. And the next slide is from much later periods, from Moscow, from 1989. Of course, the communists had several problems in terms of human rights, freedom of speech, freedom of traveling, and the like. Although in certain ways, they were successful in terms of providing housing, free healthcare, free education. They were very advanced in sports, in fine arts, this and that. But without human rights and freedom, people were still very unhappy. And this unhappiness led to the collapse of the communist system in Moscow, in the USSR first. Here you are looking at an elder woman who is looking at a broken sculpture showing the sickle and the hammer, the signs, symbols of the communist regime in the middle of a street in Moscow. This is a very nice picture showing or indicating the collapse of the communist system. And after the collapsing of the communist system, remember the communist leader, Lenin, the founder of the USSR in 1917, his statues were destined to be removed, to be broken with the collapse or the demise of the communist system. So human rights, democracy, they made it to Russia in 1989, in 1990, at the time of Gorbachev, at the period of glasnost. And the statues of the communist leaders were, one after the other, removed from the public squares or from the schoolyards. And the coming cartoon is a very nice cartoon showing the sinking of a ship, implying the collapse of the USSR, along with the bodies. Smaller boats around the sinking boat are the former communist countries, and the sinking of the ship or the collapse of the system in Moscow triggered the collapsing of the communist rule in all of these little tiny countries surrounding the USSR, which originally came together in the shape of the Warsaw Pact. And many diplomats, many foreign politicians call this period the end of the Cold War. And in this case, I prefer to call it the end of the First Cold War, or Cold War I. This meeting of the former Warsaw Pact. Warsaw Pact is the organization of the communist countries against NATO. Poland, Czech Republic, Bulgaria, Romania, many other countries were under Warsaw Pact against NATO. And this is the meeting of their leaders declaring the falling apart of Warsaw Pact against NATO. Communism passed away. Likewise, Warsaw Pact in 1990s. However, although Warsaw Pact disappeared and communism collapsed, NATO still existed, and the NATO authorities had the idea of expanding their territory towards the former communist Iron Curtain countries. And this is what we can call the beginning of the Second Cold War. Here, these two maps are very interesting. The upper map, the blue color, shows the NATO member countries. The red ones show the former Warsaw Pact. Warsaw is the capital of Poland, and their union or organization was named after Warsaw Pact, WP. This was the case in 1990, only 32 years ago. With the collapse of the communist regime, most of the former PP, WP, or Warsaw Pact countries were accepted to NATO. Please notice Germany is united, and East Germany became a member of NATO. Czech Republic, Hungary, Poland, the Baltic countries, Romania and Bulgaria, they became NATO member countries, who were former Warsaw Pact countries. And needless to say, how the Russian rulers felt about this extension of NATO in their territory. And of course, Ukraine and Georgia, they were likely to be accepted. I'm sorry. Right before, I cannot roll it. Yes. Ukraine and Georgia, they were likely to follow the same policy. Remember, NATO missiles were supposed to be placed next door to Russian border. And that was the beginning of the crisis and the beginning of this unpleasant fight or the war between Ukraine and Russia. Truthfully speaking, only 26 years ago, George Kennan, I don't know if you are familiar with the name of this diplomat or scholar, he was one of the architects of the Cold War the first. And after observing all the sad and unpleasant stuff caused by the Cold War, George Kennan thought the idea of extension for NATO was a terrible mistake because there was no rival or there was no enemy like the Warsaw Pact anymore. Therefore, it was unnecessary and unneeded. And according to this approach, the bitter questions are, in a world without WP and without USSR, is NATO still needed, and why does it need to expand towards Eastern Europe and Russia? As Mrs. Keola was mentioning by the beginning of our session, open-mindedness, questioning are inevitably required for understanding certain things or trying to get rid of one-sided approaches. And especially in this case, to be anti-NATO does not necessarily mean to be anti-American. George Kennan was an American diplomat. Likewise, all of these historians and scholars are American scholars or diplomats, and they are perfectly intellectuals, and they are what we may call anti-NATO, anti-Cold War II scholars. This is a little tiny sentence from their letter written in 1997, and delivered to the then President Bill Clinton. Russia does not now pose a threat to its Western neighbors, and the nations of Central and Eastern Europe are not in danger. For this reason, and the others cited above, we believe that NATO expansion is neither necessary nor desirable, and that this ill-conceived policy can and should be put on hold. Sincerely. The ideas of these diplomats or scholars were largely ignored, and now we are observing the sadness of the Ukrainian people, not too far from Turkey. I'm sorry. Here, the map of the Black Sea region is back. I am addressing you from this town, from Istanbul, to the south of the Black Sea, and this is where the tragedy goes on, Ukraine. And some 3.5 million refugees from Ukraine had to escape to Romania, Poland in the north, and some 50,000 to Turkey nowadays. Okay, that's it in terms of slides and the topic for the time being. In case of questions, the timing is up to Mrs. Keola. I am available for another 15-20 minutes. Are we there? Okay.
Yes, we're here. Okay, well, thank you for your presentation. Okay, I'm now going to open up the floor for questions. Okay, so if you folks have questions, it could be on his presentation, or it could be on situations that are happening now, you know, on the with Ukraine and Russia. Okay, because that would be interesting to get a different perspective also on those events. Okay, yeah, I have a question. You know, when you said that, okay, with the Korean War, yeah, because from our Western history books, there's not a lot written about, I guess, Korea's involvement. I'm sorry, not Korea, Turkey's involvement. Yeah, Turkey's involvement in the Korean War. Okay, so when that happened, Turkey was not a part of NATO yet, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, so why did Turkey help out in the Korean War?
Mrs. Keola, I believe the Turkish authorities felt lonely against the Russian threat. They wanted to be a part of NATO, but I think they thought NATO was a North Atlantic organization. There was no room, or there was no rationale for Turkey to be a part of NATO from the NATO perspective, right? So in this case, Turkey's participation in the Korean War was something like this. All right, I am not coasting the North Atlantic. I am a Mediterranean country. And you may be reluctant to get me inside, but look, what a great favor I am offering to you. I am sending my boys to a faraway geography for the sake of supporting democracy or NATO. Therefore, in return for my favor, you will owe me a favor, and that favor will be taking me into NATO. That was the Turkish approach, and they fulfilled this target because at the end of the Korean War, Turkey was accepted to the NATO organization. Does it make sense? Thank you. I'm not hearing.
Oh, okay, no. I think Trix is gonna say a question. Trix, you can unmute if you want. Just unmute and then ask a question. Okay, a student will have a question. Okay. Hi, sorry. Hi, Orhan. I'm not sure if you see that question in the chat box. It says, how do you feel about the current situation with Ukraine and Russia? And how is Russia and Turkey's relationship now? Good question, Daniela.
Yeah. Okay. Turkish-Russian relations are very, very complicated. We largely depend on Russian natural gas. Do you hear me? Do you get my voice?
Yes, yes, we hear you.
Okay. Okay. We largely depend on natural gas, and we largely depend on Russia in travel industry. They send us 5-6 million tourists every year. We largely depend on Russian consumers of Turkish vegetables and food. However, we have a lot of conflicts with Russia, primarily during the former civil war in Syria. Russia backed the leadership in Syria. Turkey backed the opposition against the leadership in Syria. So, likewise, Ukraine is a big partner of Turkey in a lot of aspects. So Turkey is nowadays like a dancer with two partners, dances with the Russian partner for a certain amount of time, and then backs the other partner against Russia in certain other aspects. We are an exporter of some weaponry to Ukraine. Some of the
I'm
weaponry.
sorry. What does Turkey export to Ukraine?
I don't know what to call them in English. Those humanless airplanes.
Drones. Is it?
Yes. We are a producer of those drones, and we are exporting to Ukraine, and most of them are used in the resistance against Russia in Ukraine. So we are good friends. Turkey has good relations with both countries, and the Turkish leadership, the Turkish president says, we can never give up one of those two countries, which is a nice approach. We are trying to build peaceful relations between Ukraine and Russia. We are hosting the peace conferences in Istanbul. The leaders came together in Istanbul once, and they are likely, not Putin, but the foreign ministers came together in Istanbul once. And Ukrainian side is likely to give up NATO. And in that case, the crazy leadership in Russia, they will say they will declare ceasefire if Ukraine gives up NATO. That is a hopeful improvement. I hope this is going to work. And just like mentioned in the letter to Bill Clinton, is NATO needed on the shores of the Black Sea? Against whom? Against which threat or against which superpower? Because the second superpower passed away in 1990. It no longer is a superpower. Therefore, like the scholar said, NATO may not be needed on the shores of the Black Sea, and this tragedy may come to an end if Ukrainian leadership changes the opinion. One interesting and very sad aspect of the Russian-Ukrainian war is that the Russian ruler is now more popular than in Russia than he was before the war. That is to say, more and more Russians are backing this adventurous leader as compared to 4 months ago. So it is very sad. It's very sad. Of course, certain aspects of your question are still unanswered by myself. But I'm not a scholar in foreign politics. This is the best I could do. Tough question.
Reading other questions in the chat.
Yeah, hold on.
Okay, LeBrain, who else?
Are
Okay,
the living conditions in Turkey?
okay, Christelle is asking, how does a crisis play into Putin's internal politics? LeBrain is asking, what do you think a Russian victory over Ukraine would look like? Wrote, did the Marshall Aid in Turkey have any negative impacts? Are the living conditions in Turkey ever affected by politics? Okay, those are good questions, you guys.
Yeah. How did the powdered milk the US gave you taste it? Tricks. The taste was awful. The taste of American powdered milk was very bad. And Turkey is the land of delicious milk and yogurt. As a child, when somebody says powdered milk is liquid. How does it become powder? And we were curious and we tasted, and the taste was awful, and we hated it, and we refused to drink it. And the teachers used to force us to drink the powdered milk sent by Uncle Sam from a faraway country. Of course, when I was a child, our understanding was Uncle Nixon, mid-1970s, and we thought he was not a good uncle because he sent us poor tasting stuff from a faraway country, right? So the taste was good, was not good. Did the Marshall Aid in Turkey have any negative impacts? Marshall Aid had some negative impacts in Turkey. The very important thing is that we did not really need Marshall Aid because we didn't fight in the Second War. Our country was not devastated during the Second War. We were perfectly neutral. So we didn't desperately need the money. And when there was a budget offered, we didn't refuse it. So we accepted the Marshall Aid. However, in this case, the money lender determined where to spend or where to invest the money. Okay? That was a kind of negative impact. I need to show you a map again. I'm sorry.
Okay, I see more questions in the chat. We can kind of, I guess, well, some of the students have questions on Turkish culture. Okay, he said, are the living conditions in Turkey ever affected by politics? And then what is the most interesting thing about Turkish culture? Oh, Mr. Sezner, you are muted. I think you're muted. Your computer? I think your speaker is muted.
Still?
Well, now we can hear you. Now we can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can just field 2 of the questions. You don't have to answer all the questions. You can answer like maybe a couple of the questions, and then we'll call it.
I was about to explain about Marshall Aid. Do you see the map on the screen?
No, we don't see the map.
The map of Turkey?
We see it.
Okay, yes, we do see the map now.
Okay. Marshall Aid didn't have too many negative aspects, but there was a few, and one was very painful for Turkey. If you can examine the map, Turkey is surrounded by an ocean in the in the west, in the south, and in the north. And before the Marshall Aid, the policy of communication, the policy of transportation in Turkey was largely dependent on the shipping. You see major cities on the Black Sea coast, all over here. Turkey attached utmost importance to shipping in the 1930s. And likewise, a nice network of railroads used to cover most of Turkey. What this has to do with the negative impact of Marshall Aid is that when the immense budget came to Turkey, we were told to give up the shipping or the railroads. Instead, we were supposed to give more importance to highways, to roads. And we didn't have oil, we still don't have oil, and we were told that we could use a part of the Marshall Aid to import oil to Turkey. We didn't have a car industry, we didn't have buses and trucks. We were told that a part of the Marshall Aid could be spent on for importing cars, trucks, and buses, right? So a large part of Marshall Aid evaporated in that way in Turkey, and shipping was largely ignored. Likewise, railroads. In an electricity-rich or coal-rich country was largely ignored. And even today, from Istanbul, say, to Samsun here, from Samsun to Trabzon here, there is no shipping. It's all highways, which is nice to have, but if you consider the huge budget spent, the huge amount of foreign currency spent on those, it's a big waste for Turkey, right? This is one of the examples of a negative impact of Marshall Aid over Turkey. All right. Chat box.
Okay. Well, I know it's running late on your end, Mr. Sezner.
What's interesting about Turkish culture?
Yes. Why don't you answer that last question? Someone asked, what Turkish food should they try? And what is interesting about Turkish culture? Okay, so I guess those can be your last questions.
Well, about Turkish culture question, it's a huge, broad topic. I may say respect to the elders, intrafamilial relations in Turkish culture. They are pretty interesting and pretty rich. If I am to give you an idea, when the kids are 18 or 19 years old, we cannot change the key of the apartment and kick them out. They still live with the parents. They still live with us until they are married, until they get married. So it is not unusual to see kids at the age of 26, say 28, 31. If they are still single, they still live with the parents, right? I find this a little interesting, especially from when you compare with the American lifestyle. The kids are still with the parents until they are getting married in Turkey. The respect or the care of the elders is interesting and rich in Turkey. Nursing homes are unusual, right? If the daughters or sons are in good shape and in good, they have good income, it's kind of shameful to send the elders to nursing homes. The kids, they feel responsible to take care of them until the end of their lives. These are the two things which suddenly came to my mind. Of course, there is many other positive and negative aspects of the Turkish culture, but these two are the good ones. But it's a very broad question. Why?
I think it's a lot like Asian culture in general. Yeah, the respect for elders,
Yes.
filial piety.
Yes.
And then Trix asked the question,
The
what
food.
Turkish food would you suggest?
Well, in Turkey or without coming to Turkey?
He said Turkish food.
Yes. But in the US, or the best Turkish food in many parts of the states are available in the Greek restaurants. Gyro, what you call gyro in the US, it is supposed to be tried. All kinds of kebabs and eggplant. Eggplant should be tried. Eggplant has a great share in the Turkish cuisine. We cook 8 or 9 different dishes made of eggplant in Turkey, and it should be tried. Yogurt, plain, flavorless yogurt is very good in Turkey. Turkish wines are very good. Baklava, the dessert, or Mrs. Keola may remember künefe, right? Künefe is supposed to be tried. These are the ones which I can mention right now.
Okay. I think
And then, Trix. Trix says merhaba. Aloha in Turkish. The Cold Wars caused by the other wars, such as the Korean War. Did the Vietnam War also affect Turkey, and what impact did it leave on Turkey? Vietnam War, interestingly, caused the rise of the left in Turkey. Right? Remember, late 1980s, the Beat generation, the hippie generation, hating the war, hating the American intervention to Vietnam. the same thinking found roots among the Turkish intellectuals, among the Turkish youth back then. And in short, I may say it opened way, or it caused the rising of leftist ideas, to a certain extent, anti-American ideas in Turkey, Vietnam War. And then, all right. I think I answered the questions I am looking at.
I think you answered most of the questions. Okay, with that said, Mr. Ceziner, we thank you, okay, for your time.
My pleasure.
I will have my students give feedback, and I hope things, between Russia and Ukraine get settled soon. And I know Turkey has been a lot of the meetings between leaders, has been in your country.
Yeah.
Yeah, so hopefully things, get better. And, ironically, the United States gives Russia its power because we buy a lot of gas. Did you know a lot of our gas here in Hawaii comes from Russia?
Really?
Yes. Yeah. Because of
on the ships?
because of these old contracts or old laws we have from before. Yeah, so they're trying to do those things. Yeah. Okay. Well, anyways, with that said, I think we will end it here because I know it's like 10 o'clock or past 10 o'clock there, and it's morning here. And I don't know what Trix is writing. He probably Googled something in Turkish. Okay. Okay. Everybody, let's give Mr. Ceziner, let's show him our appreciation. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Good night. Bye.
Thank you. Have a nice day. It's a long teaching day ahead of you.
Yes.
Take care. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.
Okay, everybody, leave the call.